Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode. My name is Sean Wassercrew, and today I'm going to be reviewing one of the more anticipated films of 2023, Disney's live-action remake of The Little Mermaid. Now, for me, there's been a lot of, well, not just for me, but for everybody, there's been a lot of news surrounding this film. A lot of it's been kind of backlash over the castings of Ariel and some others, and just a lot of people not satisfied with how this movie was going to look. Me, I don't give a crap about who's casted for these roles as long as they're good for the parts. Now, going into the actual trailers for the films and stuff like that, the movie didn't really impress me much. I wasn't really excited to see this. The original Little Mermaid, I think, is probably one of the I think it's one of the better Disney animated films out there. I mean, it's right in the middle of the Disney Renaissance with Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, where basically Disney could not miss, which is why we're seeing so many of these being redone in live action, because Disney just wants to go back and keep restriking other things that were success. Some of them work, like Disney's Beauty and the Beast remake, which I personally actually did enjoy. A lot of people had problems with that movie, but I actually think, to me, it's probably the best version of a live action remake. Lion King made almost $2 billion, but for me personally, I thought it was it was probably one of the worst live action remakes. And then you got Jungle Book, which was a success. Aladdin, I liked, but some people had issues with. Just last month, we had Peter Pan and Wendy, which I actually thought was better than it had any right to be. But then you had stuff like Pinocchio and Dumbo and Lady and the Tramp and stuff like that, where they just didn't quite measure up or didn't really serve a purpose to have a remake. So when coming into Little Mermaid, there was a lot writing on this on whether or not A, this needed to be remade, and B, if the casting choices and the decisions that they made for this live action rendition was really going to pan out and work and become a success. Now, I did go into this with pretty much the lowest of lows expectations. I literally was driving to go see this, and I was like, I really don't want to watch this film, but I am because, obviously, for the channel, and just because it's a big film. And I'm most of the time, unless it's like Minions, I'm going to probably see every big movie that comes out. But it wasn't because I cared about the casting. I have no problems with Halle Bailey, and I know at some point I'm probably going to say Halle Berry, and I apologize, but they're just so similar in terms of names. I have no problem with Halle Bailey being Ariel. I think as long as she does the role right, then I have no problems with it. It's just the movie, the trailers just didn't do a whole lot for me when I saw it, so I just wasn't excited to see this. Now, granted, going into the film, at the end of the day, after watching it, I think The Little Mermaid actually succeeded on what it was trying to do. Now, this movie is an hour longer than the animated film. So for people who are like, it's just a shot-for-shot remake, you have no complaints coming into The Little Mermaid. The original Little Mermaid was, I think, an hour and 21 minutes or an hour and 26 minutes. This one is right around 2:15. So for anyone who wants to say this is just a shot-for-shot, it ain't. There's a good hour more of content. There's more content towards Eric's side of the storyline. You find out more about Eric. You learn more about his life and the people surrounding him. There's more stuff with Ariel. There's at least 2 to 4 new songs in this. There's just a lot more meat on the bone. Some of it is really, really good. And then there's other things where it's like they could have probably left that out. But at the end of the day, I think the live-action Little Mermaid works, and I think it's going to be a huge success this year in terms of the box. Obviously, it'll probably contend with Super Mario for probably the biggest box office success for the year, even though I'd rather have that be Guardians Volume 3. But let's talk about what works for Little Mermaid first before we go into any kind of the negatives and stuff like that. First things first, Halle Bailey, people want to crap all over her and all this kind of stuff, and obviously the first thing they showed her for was her singing the iconic song, and they just took like a snippet out of that song, and it was not necessarily the best spot to show her singing that part, but Halle Bailey is great as Ariel. There are so many times while watching this movie that she just sounded like the original Ariel. Music-wise is really where they kind of are apart, but it's not in a good way or a bad way. It's just different. Does she do a little bit of runs on certain lyrics that wasn't done in the original that didn't really mesh or work well for me? Sure, but then there are other times she did things that were different that worked. I think Part of Your World, I think for the most part was actually really, really good. But I do think that like her performance with Daveed Diggs, who plays Sebastian in Under the Sea, I don't think she meshed well in terms of that song. But when she does the iconic moments, the iconic moments that people remember from the original, such as her screaming "Part of Your World" while on the rock with the waves, I think she nailed that. And there's a lot of things that she does so well in this as playing as Ariel, to the point where it feels like Ariel's character is more complete. You understand her reasons, you understand her motives. They do this kind of inner monologuing and inner singing at points in the film when she loses her voice when she's in human form, that I thought was a good way to not have her go through the whole film not expressing herself, but allowed you to understand where the character's mindset was throughout the film. It doesn't. She only does it in singing, in terms of songs. So she's not doing inner monologuing, just talking throughout the film. But I do think that that was a smart choice to not have her basically be silent for a good hour of the film. Jonah Hauer-King, who plays Eric, I do think that they do give him a lot more to chew on as a character compared to just the Prince Eric that we saw in Little Mermaid, which was just basically a pretty prince that that Ariel wanted to be with, and not a whole lot of substance as a character. You definitely get a lot more of the Eric character in this, and you understand his character and his motivations and his reasons for why he does things. And I think Jonah does actually a relatively solid job in the role. He does get his own song in this, and it's not good. And it's not that he's a bad singer. It's one of those things where it's like, he's kind of just, his movements are wrong. It honestly looks like he's just like this drunken dude stumbling around, waving all over the place, like he can't sit still, like he's got ants in his pants. And his vocals are fine, but for some reason they just feel off key or off tone from the song that he's trying to sing. He belts when he shouldn't belt. He runs when he shouldn't run. It's a very wish-washy performance. Outside of the singing, I think he actually does a really solid job in the film, and I believe his character when he's trying to find this mystery woman who saved him. There's sometimes where he could have given a little bit more. He kind of felt like it was more reserved in a way, but I still liked his performance overall. Melissa McCarthy as Ursula. I think she's almost as pitch perfect of casting as you would if when you casted Jack Black as Poe in Kung Fu Panda. I think Melissa McCarthy was born to play the Ursula character. I think she does Ursula justice. You buy into her character. You buy into her performance as Ursula. And Melissa McCarthy is on and off for me. There's times where I really, really enjoy her performances, and there are times where I just downright hate her performances. But herself as Ursula, I think she knocked it out of the park. I do have some issues with how they shot Ursula, especially in the first half of the film, when they're basically kind of treating her as like, they don't want to give away that Melissa McCarthy's Ursula. They're still trying to hide her and stuff. And then when they first start showing her, they kind of make her almost like roll around rocks and stuff, almost like a slug. And she's just kind of rolling like a roly-poly instead of just staying upright like Ursula does in the animated film, which just kind of bothered me. And I was hoping throughout the film, I was like, would she just sit up straight? But she finally does, and then for the rest of them, she's pretty much fine after that. But just the first few scenes of her, and it's not McCarthy's fault. It's literally how Rob Marshall, the director, wanted to shoot Ursula as a character. It was just kind of off and annoying, but not anything to do with Melissa. I think she was great, and when she sings Poor Unfortunate Souls, I think that she actually did a great job singing that, even though I'm sick and tired of hearing Melissa McCarthy sing because of those stupid hotel commercials that she's been doing since the Super Bowl. But she does a standout overall job for Ursula, and she definitely did the character justice as one of Disney's greatest villains. Javier Bardem as King Triton, he does get a little bit more to do than what King Triton did in the animated film. I think Bardem does a solid job. It's still not enough to really make his performance like big or not, but for what he does with the parts that he's given, I think he does a solid job. Art Malik, he plays Sir Grimsby, which is kind of like Eric's like watcher, father figure-esque kind of the film. I actually really enjoyed his character overall, even though I do felt like he was kind of putting on a impersonation of Mark Strong, which anyone who knows Mark Strong, he's basically playing like Mark Strong did in The Kingsman, which I'm all for because I fucking love that performance. But I really enjoyed his character for the most part. But it's just every time he was performing, I felt like I was watching someone impersonating Mark Strong. The standout outside of Halle Bailey as Ariel is definitely Daveed Diggs as Sebastian. Um, Daveed Diggs is great in everything. I don't think I've ever disliked Daveed Diggs' performances ever, and his performances as Sebastian, that is what you really want to come to see outside of Halle Bailey's Ariel. He's hilarious. His singing obviously is great. We know him from Hamilton. We know he can do those things. And just his kind of side banter with Scuttle and Flounder and just Ariel in general. Anytime Sebastian's on screen, you are all about everything he does. And Daveed Diggs does fantastic voice work. Jacob Tremblay as Flounder, I think he actually did a solid job. Wasn't really a big fan of the design they used for Flounder in the film. I think they could have made him a little bit puffier instead of super lean compared to the animated version of Flounder. I wish we got more of Flounder in the film than what we got. When he's on screen, I actually really enjoyed Jacob Tremblay's performance and persona of Flounder, but he's just not in the movie enough. Now, someone who's in the movie way too much is Scuttle, played by Awkwafina. It's fine, but she overdoes everything. She's basically Awkwafina. I mean, Awkwafina, when she works, she works. When she doesn't, she doesn't. And in this one, it's kind of an on-off performance. There are certain times where Awkwafina's performance of Scuttle is on point, and a lot of times it's with her opposite Daveed Diggs as Sebastian. And then there are other times where it's like, oh my god, shut up. Stop talking. There's a performance with her where she's rapping, and it's one of the most annoying songs in the film. It's probably the worst song in the film. And it isn't until Daveed Diggs chimes in and starts rapping with her that the song actually starts to be okay, but it's too little too late. It's easily one of the worst songs, right next to Eric's song in the film. But she every time she got on screen, you're immediately like, okay, here we go. And a lot of it could have just been the writing, but I feel like most of the stuff she was saying in the film was just kind of ad-libbed. And with Awkwafina, I feel like if she's following a script, I think she's better than her just letting her go off the handle. So it's kind of an on-off performance for her overall. In terms of the music, I think most of the iconic songs hit really, really well. Part of This World, Under the Sea Until Ariel chimes in, I think was really great. Kiss the Girl is honestly, in my opinion, I think probably the best song and best rendition of said song in the film. I think visually it looked fantastic. I think, like I said, I knocked Awkwafina earlier, but I think Awkwafina, Jacob Tremblay, and Daveed Diggs, as well as everyone else in that performance, I think is the highlight of the film for me for that. So song-wise, I think it was great. The new songs don't really add too much to the overall experience. If anything, they stand out because you know that they're not the original songs. None of them really stood out as, oh wow, this is powerful, much like I think it's Evermore or Nevermore from Beauty and the Beast, which I thought was a fantastic new song, and even Jasmine's new song in Aladdin I thought worked really, really well for the film. The new songs in this one don't really hit. It's nice to hear something different, but they're not memorable. They're not songs you're going to remember by the time Little Mermaid ends unless you constantly listen to the soundtrack. But the OG songs do hit. The renditions of them, almost all of them, are really, really good. Kiss the Girl's definitely the highlight of the film. Visually, I think it's kind of a mix. I do think the beginning of the film, at least the first like 10 minutes or so, is very rough. I think it's going boom, 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 quick, 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 quick to try to keep kids lined up and attached to it, that it doesn't take time to breathe. But the color palette in the very beginning of the film is very dark, and you can chalk it up to it's the mood that Ariel has throughout the film, because this is like when she's like sad and wants to big more, and then when she is happy, it is a lot more colorful, almost like kind of a mood coloring. When the movie is colorful and bright, it looks fantastic. When it's dark and gloomy and all this kind of stuff, you are kind of watching it going, are they doing this because of budgetary reasons, or are they doing this because it's the ocean and the ocean is dark? Either way, it doesn't necessarily work. There's the shark scene at the very beginning of the film. Shot great, dark as hell. The final battle sequence with Ursula, which everyone who's watched Little Mermaid, you know the scenes I'm talking about, is so damn dark that you're just wondering, did they do that so that way the CGI wasn't overblown by a gigantic Ursula? But ultimately, it just, I wanted to see more of what we were actually seeing and not just shadowy figure of a gigantic Ursula. So in terms of visually how it's shot, it works when it works. It doesn't when it doesn't. Like I said, performances wise, I think everyone was for the most part was solid. At the end of the day, I do think this version works really well. I think most people, if you're going in with an open mind or lower expectations, I think you're going to be surprised with what you get. If you're going in to hate the film, then you're going to hate the film. But if you go in with just like, all right, let's see what happens here, I think at the end of it, you're going to be like, that was very solid. It's one of the better live action Disney remakes. It's not the best. It's probably not even top three. But it's not one of these like a Pinocchio or Dumbo or Lady and the Tramp or even Lion King where you go, man, they really should have never have touched this. Or wow, they really failed to try to make this feel relevant to today. I think that Little Mermaid at least at that mindset, succeeded expectations and really actually put on a very solid film overall. I definitely recommend it if you're a fan of the OG film. If you're a fan of Disney films in general, I think you're going to have a fun time watching this. Haley Bailey, or Halle Bailey, however I'm probably saying it wrong. I apologize. She's fantastic as Ariel. I think she does a really great job. I think people need to kind of just let go of her being Ariel and just appreciate the performance that she puts on. She was literally their only choice. They listened. She was the first casting, kind of interview, and they immediately were like, "That's her." If Rob Marshall and Disney were behind her, then you should be behind her too, because she actually puts on a really good performance as Ariel. Same thing with Melissa McCarthy as Ursula, and Daveed Diggs as Sebastian steals the show whenever he's on screen. For me, I'm going to give The Little Mermaid a 74%. I think it's a very solid Disney film that you guys will all enjoy as long as you go in with an open mind. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe onto the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, you can follow us on all those social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, Brian Michaels and myself will be back to do this week's episode of the Weekly Crusaders, where we talk about 2 movies that came out during this week in movie history. We also will have Cinemasochism coming out here soon, where we're going to be talking about a movie that I personally have never ever heard of. It's a movie that Brian picked, and he says it should be fun. We'll find out. Coming up in terms of movies, next week we've got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, one of my more anticipated films in the year. I cannot wait to see that. Also, The Boogeyman comes out. I'm waiting for more of a word of mouth on that before I decide to go spend money on that horror film because, frankly, the trailers have not really done much for me. There's a few other movies that came out during this week, but I'm just too busy schedule-wise to go see them, which is About My Father, which honestly looked awful, Kandahar, which I'm sure Brian will check out, and The Machine, which I might just catch that when it comes out on streaming. But nonetheless, we will definitely be back here next week for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, maybe The Boogeyman. But Brian, Michaels, and myself will definitely be back here this week and next week for more Weekly Crusaders and Cinemasochism, so be on the lookout for all that. And until next time, in case I don't see you, go watch some movies and go have some fun.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.